What would you do if 25 of the smartest people in the world told you something was impossible? Would you believe them? Would you give up? Or would you find a 26th person, someone nobody had thought to ask, who looked at the problem for 60 seconds and said, "I know how to fix this"? Alessio DeMarco asked himself that question on a Thursday morning in June, standing in the wreckage of his daughter's bedroom, surrounded by 25 experts who had all given him the same answer. It can't be done. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments section where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. Alessio DeMarco was not a man who accepted failure. He had built $1 billion empire from nothing. Real estate, construction, shipping, and the quiet, invisible businesses that didn't appear on any public registry, but generated more income than everything else combined. He had survived assassination attempts, corporate takeovers, federal investigations, and a rival family that had spent 30 years trying to destroy him. He had buried his wife, raised his daughter alone. Isabella had been the light of Alessio's life. He had met her when he was 25, and she was 23. A summer festival in the old neighborhood, string lights overhead, the smell of grilled sausage and fresh bread. She was dancing with her friends, her dark hair flying, her laugh carrying across the square. Alessio had watched her for an hour before he worked up the courage to approach. When he finally did, she looked at him, really looked at him, the way people rarely did, and said, "You're Alessio DeMarco. My father says your family is dangerous." "We are," Alessio said, "but I'm not." She studied his face for a moment, then she smiled. "Prove it." He spent the next 2 years proving it. He proved it by showing up, by being gentle, by building a legitimate business empire instead of inheriting the one his father had built on fear, by proposing to her on the same spot where they had met, under the same string lights, with the same band playing in the background, by promising her a life that didn't involve guns or violence or men who disappeared in the night. Isabella said yes. She always said she married Alessio, despite his name, not because of it. She was the only person in the world who could say that and mean it. When Sophia was born, Isabella changed. Not in a bad way. In the way that mothers change, the way that having a child rearranges your entire universe around a single, small body. She painted the nursery yellow. "Like sunshine," she said, "so she'll always wake up to light." She hung wooden stars from the ceiling. She sang the same Sicilian lullabies. Alessio's mother had taught her after the wedding, when Isabella had asked about his childhood, and his mother had taken her hands and said, "Let me teach you the songs that kept my son safe. You'll need them someday." Isabella died on a Tuesday, a rainy Tuesday in October. She was driving home from Sophia's school, a parent-teacher conference. Sophia was doing well in math but needed to work on her reading, when a delivery truck crossed the median and hit her head-on. She died instantly. The paramedics said she didn't suffer. Alessio didn't believe them. He couldn't believe anything anymore. Sophia was 6 years old. She didn't understand death. She kept asking when Mama was coming home. Alessio didn't know how to answer. He didn't know how to do any of this. He had built an empire, negotiated billion-dollar deals, survived assassination attempts. And he couldn't explain to his 6-year-old daughter why her mother wasn't coming back. For the first year after Isabella died, Alessio functioned on autopilot. He went to work. He came home. He read Sophia bedtime stories, the same stories Isabella used to read. He tried to hum the lullabies Isabella used to hum, but the notes caught in his throat, and he couldn't finish them. At night, after Sophia was asleep, he would sit in his office and stare at Isabella's photograph. and wonder how he was supposed to keep living when half of him was buried in the ground. Then the night terrors started, and everything got worse, and never once, not once, asked anyone for help. Alessio DeMarco solved his own problems. That was who he was. That was what the DeMarco name meant. But this problem was different. This problem had a name, and her name was Sofia. Sofia DeMarco was 8 years old when she stopped sleeping. Not the ordinary restlessness of childhood, the monster under the bed, the glass of water, the one more story before lights out. This was something else. She would fall asleep at 9 o'clock, exhausted from a day of school and homework and piano lessons, and within 20 minutes she would wake up screaming, not crying, not whimpering. Screaming, a raw, primal sound that came from somewhere so deep it didn't sound like it belonged to a child at all. Her eyes would be open, but she wouldn't be awake. She would thrash and kick and claw at the air, like she was fighting something only she could see. And then, as suddenly as it started, she would collapse back onto her pillow, drenched in sweat, her breathing ragged, and she wouldn't remember any of it in the morning. The first few nights, Alessio thought it was nightmares. His daughter had lost her mother 2 years ago. A car accident on a rainy highway, the same kind of accident that had shaped so much of Alessio's own life. Grief did strange things to children. He knew that. He had read the books. He had spoken to the therapists. He had held his daughter while she cried and told her that Mama was watching from heaven and that everything would be okay. So when the screaming started, he assumed it was just another manifestation of grief. It would pass. Everything passed. It didn't pass. It got worse. After 2 weeks, Sofia was sleeping less than 3 hours a night. The dark circles under her eyes looked like bruises. She was losing weight. She couldn't concentrate in school. Her teachers called, first with concern, then with alarm. Mr. DeMarco. Sofia fell asleep at her desk again. She's not eating her lunch. She cried during recess for no reason. Is everything okay at home? Alessio didn't know how to answer that question. Everything was fine at home. He had a mansion. He had staff. He had a daughter who was the center of his universe. And she was falling apart in front of him, and he didn't know why, and he didn't know how to stop it. He took her to doctors. Of course he did. He was Alessio DeMarco. He had access to the best medical care money could buy. The first doctor was a pediatrician who had treated Sofia since she was born. He ran blood tests, allergy panels, neurological exams. Everything came back normal. Children go through phases, the pediatrician said. It's probably anxiety. Try a nightlight. Try reading to her before bed. Try a weighted blanket. Alessio tried all of it. The nightlight didn't work. The reading didn't work. The weighted blanket made it worse. Sofia said it felt like something was holding her down, and she screamed louder than ever. The second doctor was a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. She spent 3 sessions with Sofia, drawing pictures and playing with dolls and asking gentle questions about Mama. At the end of the 3rd session, she sat down with Alessio and said, "Your daughter is not experiencing ordinary nightmares. This is something neurological. I'm going to refer you to a specialist." The specialist was a neurologist from Johns Hopkins, a man in his 50s who had published 70 papers on childhood sleep disorders. He hooked Sofia up to machines that measured her brain waves and her heart rate and her breathing patterns while she slept. He reviewed the data for 2 days. Then he called Alessio into his office. "Mr. DeMarco, your daughter has a condition I've only seen twice in my career. It's called parasomnia with night terror features. Essentially, her brain is getting stuck between sleep and wakefulness. She's not having nightmares. She's not processing trauma. Her brain is literally malfunctioning during the transition between sleep stages. The screaming, The thrashing. It's a neurological event, not a psychological one, finally. An answer. Alessio felt something loosen in his chest, the first glimmer of hope he'd had in weeks. How do we fix it? The neurologist paused. It was a long pause, the kind of pause that told Alessio he wasn't going to like what came next. There is a treatment, the neurologist said. It's called a chronotherapeutic intervention. Essentially, we would need to reset your daughter's sleep architecture by precisely controlling her sleep schedule and environment over a period of several weeks. It requires a device, a specialized piece of equipment that monitors her brain activity in real time and delivers gentle stimulation at exactly the right moment in her sleep cycle to prevent the night terrors from triggering. Where do we get this device? That's the problem, Mr. DeMarco. There's only one in the world that's capable of doing what your daughter needs. It was custom built by a research team in Zurich for a clinical trial that ended 3 years ago. The device is currently decommissioned, sitting in a storage room at the University of Zurich, disconnected, gathering dust. The team that built it has dispersed. The lead engineer retired. The software it runs on is no longer supported, and even if you could get it, even if you could somehow bring it here and power it on, it would need to be completely recalibrated for Sophia's specific brain patterns. The original team estimated that would take 6 weeks of continuous work by at least 3 specialists. Alessio stared at the neurologist. So you're telling me my daughter's cure exists, sitting in a storage room in Switzerland, and nobody can make it work? I'm telling you the device was built for a clinical trial. It was never intended for long-term use. The technology is extremely complex. The people who understood it are no longer available. I wish I had a better answer. Alessio DeMarco had never accepted failure. He wasn't about to start now. Over the next 3 weeks, Alessio assembled a team. Not just any team, the best team money could buy. He started with the original research group from Zurich. The lead engineer, a man named Dr. Klaus Reinhardt, had retired to a small village in the Austrian Alps. Alessio flew there personally, knocked on his door, and offered him $5 million to come out of retirement for 6 weeks. Dr. Reinhardt was 72 years old, with a bad hip and a lifetime of achievements behind him. He said no. Alessio offered him $10 million. He said no. Alessio offered him a fully staffed research facility in whatever location he chose, a blank check for equipment, and a guarantee that his grandchildren would never have to work a day in their lives. Dr. Reinhardt looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You love your daughter very much, more than anything in the world. I had a daughter once. She died of leukemia when she was 9. Dr. Reinhardt's eyes were distant, lost in a memory that was 40 years old but still raw. I couldn't save her. The technology didn't exist yet. Every day since then, I've wondered what I would have given for a chance like the one you're offering your daughter." He stood up, slowly, his hip protesting. "I'll do it, not for the money, for her." 1 expert down, 24 to go. The 3rd expert was harder to find. Her name was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and she had been the software architect who wrote the original operating system for the sleep device. She was a prodigy. At 24, she had written code so elegant that her professors at Tokyo University had accused her of plagiarism because they couldn't believe a student could produce work of that quality. She had proven them wrong, of course. She had published her methodology, defended her thesis, and gone on to become the youngest lead engineer in the history of the Zurich research program. But the program had burned her out, the pressure, the politics, the constant fighting for funding. After the clinical trial ended, she had walked away from everything. She had moved to a small village in Hokkaido, bought a failing organic farm with her savings, and spent the last decade growing rice and vegetables and refusing to touch a computer. She was 41 years old now. She had calluses on her hands and sun damage on her face, and she was happier than she had ever been in her life. When Alessio found her, standing knee-deep in a flooded rice paddy, wearing rubber boots and a wide-brimmed hat, her face streaked with mud. She didn't recognize his name. She didn't know who the DeMarco family was. She didn't care. "You want me to write code again?" She laughed, a genuine, startled laugh, like someone who had just been asked to perform a magic trick they had forgotten they knew. "Mr. DeMarco, I haven't written a line of code in 6 years. I don't even own a computer anymore. I use my phone for weather forecasts and ordering seeds. The person you're looking for doesn't exist anymore. The person I'm looking for wrote the operating system for a device that can save my daughter's life. That person exists. She's standing in front of me." Yuki's smile faded. She looked at Alessio for a long moment, really looked at him, the way people who have spent years away from the noise of the world learn to look at things. "Tell me about your daughter." And Alessio did. He told her about Sophia, about the night terrors, about the 20 minutes of screaming followed by collapse, about the dark circles under her eyes, and the teachers calling, and the doctors who couldn't help, about the device, sitting in his basement, and the team he was assembling, and the ticking clock that wouldn't stop. Yuki listened to all of it without interrupting. When Alessio finished, she looked down at her hands. The hands that had once typed code at 120 words per minute, that had built systems that had been published in journals and presented at conferences, that were now covered in dirt from a rice paddy in Hokkaido. "I'll do it," she said. "But I have conditions. Name them. First, I'm bringing my rice. The team in Zurich always ate terrible food, frozen pizzas and vending machine snacks. I'm not going through that again. Second, I work my own hours. I haven't done this in 6 years. If I push too hard, I'll burn out before I finish. I need to pace myself. Third, if we succeed, when we succeed, you don't owe me anything. No money, no job offers, no trying to pull me back into the world I left behind. I go back to my farm. I go back to my rice. I go back to my life." Alessio agreed to all of it. He didn't tell her that he had already arranged to fund her farm for the rest of her life, whether she wanted the money or not. Some gifts didn't need to be announced. The fourth expert was a Dutch hardware specialist named Henrik van der Meer. He was 68 years old, semi-retired, living in a houseboat on a canal in Amsterdam with his wife and 3 cats. He had built the original circuit boards for the sleep device. Delicate, hand-soldered components that no automated factory could replicate. When Alessio found him, he was sitting on the deck of his houseboat, drinking beer and watching the sunset, his soldering iron gathering dust in a closet somewhere. He said no immediately. "I'm too old for this, Mr. DeMarco. My hands shake now. I can't do precision work anymore." Alessio looked at the man's hands. They were steady. Rock steady. "Your hands aren't shaking. You're just afraid they will." Henrik stared at him. "You don't know anything about me. I know you built something that could save my daughter. I know you haven't built anything since. I know that for 15 years, every time you see a complex circuit board, you think about the device in Zurich and wonder if you could still do it. I know that the only thing stopping you is fear. Fear that you've lost your touch, fear that you're too old, fear that you'll fail. And I know that fear is a terrible reason to let a child suffer." Henrik was silent for a very long time. The sun finished setting, the canal water turned from gold to silver to black. His wife came out with 2 more beers. She looked at Alessio, then at her husband, and she didn't say anything. She just put the beers down and went back inside. 6 weeks, Henrik said finally. 6 weeks, and then I'm coming back to my boat, and my cats, and my beer. The fifth expert was a Brazilian neuroscientist named Dr. Lucia Oliveira. She was 45 years old, brilliant and terrifying. She had designed the original stimulation protocols for the Zurich trial, the precise sequences of electrical impulses that would guide a malfunctioning brain back into its proper rhythm. She was currently working at a research hospital in Sao Paulo, treating children with severe epilepsy. She had a waiting list 6 months long, and a staff of 15 junior doctors who depended on her. She couldn't leave. Alessio didn't ask her to leave. He asked her to consult remotely. He built a dedicated video link between her office in Sao Paulo and the laboratory in his basement. He hired 3 additional junior doctors to cover her patient load so she could spend 4 hours a day on Sophia's case. He paid for everything, the equipment, the staff, the overtime, the infrastructure. Dr. Oliveira was the only expert who didn't need convincing. She looked at Sophia's case file, looked at the device specifications and said, "This is solvable. Hard, but solvable. I'm in." Expert by expert, Alessio assembled his team. Each brought something essential. The Dutch hardware specialist reconstructed the circuit boards from memory, his hands, which he had claimed were shaking, moving with the precision of a surgeon. The Brazilian neuroscientist redesigned the stimulation protocols from her office in Sao Paulo, video calling into the lab at all hours of the night. The Japanese software architect resurrected code she had written 15 years ago, muttering curses in her native language at the younger version of herself who had been too clever for her own good. There was an Israeli data analyst named David Mizrahi who had processed the original clinical trial results. He was now 62, a grandfather of 4, and he had kept every single data file from the trial, backed up on 3 separate hard drives, stored in a fireproof safe in his basement. "I knew someone would need this someday," he said. "I just didn't know it would be a little girl." There was a French biomedical technician named Camille Dubois who had maintained the device during the original study. She was the only person alive who knew the exact calibration sequence required to bring the hardware back online after years of disuse. She flew in from Paris with a single suitcase and stayed for the entire duration of the project. She never complained about the hours or the pressure. When asked why she was so dedicated, she said, "Because the device saved my nephew's life during the trial. I owe it everything. The least I can do is make sure it saves one more." There was a Canadian child psychologist named Dr. Margaret Chen who specialized in parasomnia, the 7th such specialist Alessio had consulted, and the first one who didn't start the conversation by saying, "I've never seen anything like this." She had treated over 200 children with night terrors. She knew, better than anyone, what was at stake. She didn't just treat Sophia, she treated Alessio too. She was the one who noticed that he hadn't slept in 4 days, that he wasn't eating, that he was running on caffeine and desperation. She was the one who sat him down and said, "Your daughter needs you to be functional. You can't help her if you collapse. Eat something, sleep for 4 hours. Then come back. I'll stay with her." Alessio didn't sleep for 4 hours, but he did eat. A sandwich. Dr. Chen had made it herself. Ham and cheese on white bread. It was the first thing he had eaten in 2 days, and it tasted like the best meal of his life. There were others. A German neurophysicist who had modeled the mathematical equations behind the stimulation frequencies. An American pediatric neurologist who had published the definitive textbook on childhood sleep disorders. A South Korean data scientist who specialized in pattern recognition in EEG readings, an Australian biomedical engineer who had designed 3 generations of sleep monitoring equipment. an Italian neurosurgeon who had operated on children with brain injuries and understood the fragility of the developing brain better than anyone, a British clinical researcher who had run the statistical analysis for the original trial, a Swedish neuroscientist who had developed a new imaging technique that could visualize brain activity in real time with unprecedented clarity, a Chinese electrical engineer who had designed power systems for medical devices in remote locations, an Indian software developer who specialized in legacy system migration, the exact skill needed to make 15-year-old code run on modern hardware, a Russian biophysicist who had studied the effects of electromagnetic stimulation on neural tissue, a Nigerian pediatrician who had spent 30 years treating children in underserved communities and had seen more cases of sleep disorders than anyone in the room, an Argentine biomedical ethicist who made sure every procedure was safe, a Turkish neuroanatomist who had mapped the sleep centers of the brain in microscopic detail, a Greek clinical psychologist who specialized in family dynamics during medical crises, a Polish hardware technician who had built custom components for dozens of medical devices, and there was a Mexican neurologist named Dr. Elena Vasquez, the most important expert of all. She had been 27 years old when she enrolled in the Zurich trial. She had suffered from night terrors since childhood, the same condition that now afflicted Sophia. The device had cured her completely. She had gone on to become a neurologist specifically so she could help other people with the same condition. When Alessio found her, working at a hospital in Mexico City, treating her own patients with the techniques that had saved her, she didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting 15 years for someone to resurrect that device," she said. "I knew there would be a child who needed it. I knew the technology wasn't meant to die in a storage room. Count me in." By the time the team was fully assembled, 25 experts from 14 countries were working around the clock in the basement of Alessio's mansion. They had transformed the lower level into a state-of-the-art neuroscience laboratory, clean rooms, server racks, monitoring stations, a dedicated surgical suite. The device itself had been retrieved from the storage room in Zurich, shipped across the Atlantic in a climate-controlled container, and installed in a custom-built clean room directly beneath Sophia's bedroom. A dedicated fiber-optic line connected the device to a monitoring station where the team could observe Sophia's brain activity in real time while she slept. Upstairs, a rotating team of child psychologists kept Sophia company, playing games, reading stories, doing everything possible to keep her calm and distracted from the chaos unfolding beneath her feet. The second expert was Dr. Reinhardt's former research partner, a neuroengineer named Dr. Fatima Al-Rashid, who now worked for a private medical technology company in Dubai. She was harder to convince. She had a non-compete clause that prevented her from doing outside work. Alessio bought the company, all of it, for $47 million. He didn't blink. When the acquisition was finalized 48 hours later, Dr. Al-Rashid's non-compete clause was no longer relevant. She was now working for a subsidiary of DeMarco Industries. She could do whatever she wanted. The third expert was a software architect named Yuki Tanaka, who had written the original operating system for the sleep device. She had left academia a decade ago and was now running a small organic farm in northern Japan. She hadn't written a line of code in 6 years. When Alessio found her, standing in a rice paddy, wearing rubber boots, her hands covered in mud, she laughed at his offer. "You want me to resurrect code I wrote 15 years ago on a system that doesn't exist anymore. That's not engineering. That's archaeology." Alessio offered to fund her farm for the rest of her life. She said yes. "But I'm bringing my rice," she added. The Zurich team always ate terrible food. Expert by expert, Alessio assembled his team, a Dutch hardware specialist who had built the original circuit boards, a Brazilian neuroscientist who had designed the stimulation protocols, an Israeli data analyst who had processed the clinical trial results, a French biomedical technician who had maintained the device during the original study, a Canadian child psychologist who specialized in parasomnia, the seventh such specialist Alessio had consulted, and the first one who didn't start the conversation by saying, "I've never seen anything like this." By the end of the third week, Alessio had 25 of the most brilliant minds in neuroscience and biomedical engineering. Assembled in a state-of-the-art facility he had built in the basement of his mansion. He had spent nearly $200 million. He had bought a company, funded a farm, relocated families, and convinced retired legends to return to work. The device had been retrieved from the storage room in Zurich, shipped across the Atlantic in a climate-controlled container, and installed in a custom-built laboratory directly beneath Sophia's bedroom. A dedicated fiber-optic line connected the device to a monitoring station, where the team could observe Sophia's brain activity in real time while she slept. And none of it worked. It was the Israeli data analyst, David Mizrahi, who first noticed the problem. He was running calibration tests on the device's signal processor, the component that read brainwave patterns and translated them into data the software could interpret. The numbers weren't matching. Every test produced results that were close to the expected values, but not exact, off by margins that would be irrelevant in most contexts, but were catastrophic in this one. The device needed to deliver electrical stimulation at precisely the right microsecond in Sophia's sleep cycle. Being off by even a tenth of a second would not only fail to prevent the night terror, it could actually trigger one. "The frequency range is wrong," David said, staring at his screen. The device was calibrated for adult brain waves. Adult brains operate in a different frequency band than children's brains. The signal processor literally cannot read the range Sophia's brain is producing. Dr. Reinhardt leaned over his shoulder. "How far off are we?" "About 12%. That doesn't sound like much, but in signal processing terms, it's an ocean. It's the difference between hearing a whisper and hearing nothing at all. Can we modify the signal processor?" David shook his head. "It's a hardware component, custom-built. We'd have to fabricate a new one from scratch. That would take months." And Sophia, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew what he was going to say. Sophia didn't have months. The sleep deprivation was already causing measurable cognitive decline. Her memory was deteriorating. Her attention span had collapsed. Dr. Chen had warned Alessio privately that, if they couldn't solve this within 2 weeks, the damage might become permanent. "Let me look at it," Henrik said. The Dutch hardware specialist pushed his way through the crowd of experts and examined the signal processor with a magnifying glass. His hands, the hands he had claimed were shaking, were perfectly steady. He studied the circuitry for 20 minutes, while the rest of the team waited in tense silence. Then he looked up. "I can modify it," he said. "Not perfectly, not to full pediatric specifications, but I can push the frequency range down by about half of what we need. It won't be ideal. It might not work at all, but it's the best I can do with the hardware we have." Half wasn't enough. Everyone knew it, but it was better than nothing. Henrik worked through the night, his soldering iron moving with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years doing this. By morning, the modification was complete. The signal processor could now read about 88% of Sophia's brainwave patterns. Close. So close, but not close enough. For the next 2 weeks, the team tried everything. Yuki rewrote the software to compensate for the missing 12% using predictive algorithms. Lucia redesigned the stimulation protocols to work with incomplete data. The German neurophysicist ran mathematical models that suggested there might be a workaround. The South Korean data scientist analyzed thousands of hours of pediatric EEG readings, looking for patterns that might bridge the gap. The Swedish neuroscientist deployed her new imaging technique to map Sophia's brain in greater detail than had ever been done before, hoping to find a workaround. The Russian biophysicist proposed a radical new stimulation pattern that might bypass the frequency limitation entirely. The Italian neurosurgeon suggested an invasive approach, implanting electrodes directly into Sophia's brain, something no one wanted to consider, but everyone was forced to discuss as the clock ran out. Every single attempt failed. The device could read most of Sophia's brain. But not enough. Never enough. You have to understand, Dr. Reinhardt said on the 15th day, his voice hollow with exhaustion. We're trying to do something the device was never designed to do. It's like trying to tune a piano when half the strings are missing. We can get close. We can get very close. But we can't get it right. And with this condition, close isn't good enough. It has to be exact. Alessio looked at the 25 exhausted faces in his basement, the most brilliant minds in neuroscience and biomedical engineering, the people he had assembled from 14 countries at a cost of nearly $200 million. They had given everything. They had worked 20-hour days for 3 weeks. They had pushed themselves past every reasonable limit, and they had failed. It can't be done, Dr. Reinhardt said. I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco. We've exhausted every option. Alessio nodded. He didn't blame them. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just walked upstairs, past the monitoring equipment and the server racks and the clean rooms, past the child psychologists who were keeping his daughter company, past the yellow nursery with the wooden stars on the ceiling that his wife had painted before she died. He walked into Sophia's room, where his daughter was finally asleep after 72 hours of wakefulness, an exhausted, fitful sleep that would be interrupted by screaming within the hour, as it always was. He sat down in the chair beside her bed. He took her small hand in his, and he wept. The device powered on. The software, after 2 weeks of painstaking reconstruction by Yuki Tanaka, booted successfully. The hardware, restored by the Dutch specialist, passed every diagnostic test. The stimulation protocols, redesigned by the Brazilian neuroscientist, were theoretically sound. But when they tried to calibrate the system to Sophia's specific brain patterns, they hit a wall. A fundamental incompatibility that nobody had anticipated. The device had been designed for adult brainwave patterns. Sophia's 8-year-old brain operated on different frequencies, frequencies the device's core architecture literally could not process. It's a hardware limitation, Dr. Reinhardt said, his voice heavy with defeat. The signal processor in the device can't read the frequency range of a child's brain. It was built for the adult clinical trial. We never tested it on pediatric subjects. It never occurred to us that someone would need to. Can we build a new signal processor? From scratch? Yes, in the time your daughter has before the sleep deprivation causes permanent neurological damage. He shook his head. No, it would take months. I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco. We've exhausted every option. 25 experts, $200 million, 3 weeks of 20-hour days, and the answer was still no. It can't be done. Alessio stood in the wreckage of his daughter's bedroom. The monitoring equipment, the cables, the computers that had been moved in to track her sleep cycles, and he felt something he had never felt before. Despair. Real, bottomless despair. His daughter was upstairs, finally asleep after 72 hours of wakefulness, and when she woke up, if she woke up, she would still be trapped in the same nightmare, and he had done everything. Everything, and it wasn't enough. That was when he heard the humming. The sound was so faint he almost didn't notice it. It drifted through the hallway like smoke, a woman's voice, low and slightly off-key, humming an old Sicilian lullaby, the same lullaby Alessio's own mother had sung to him when he was a child, rocking him in the kitchen of their small apartment while pasta sauce simmered on the stove. The same lullaby he had sung to Sophia when she was a baby, holding her in the yellow nursery with the wooden stars on the ceiling. The same lullaby his wife Isabella had hummed while she painted that nursery, 7 months pregnant, her belly round and glowing, her voice filling the house with warmth. He hadn't heard that song since Isabella died. He had tried to hum it once, alone in his office, late at night, but the notes had caught in his throat, and he had never tried again. Now it was coming from his hallway. From a stranger, from a heavyset woman in a grey cleaning uniform who was on her hands and knees, scrubbing his baseboards with a toothbrush, humming the song that held his entire life inside its melody. Maria Ferrante had been working at the DeMarco mansion for exactly 8 days. Rosa had hired her, the head housekeeper, who had been with the family since before Sophia was born, who had seen everything and said nothing, who had kept this household running through death and grief and the slow unraveling of a man who had once been the most powerful person in the city. Rosa had interviewed 12 candidates for the East Wing cleaning position. She had chosen Maria because of 2 things. First, Maria had shown up 15 minutes early for her interview, which told Rosa she was reliable. Second, when Rosa had explained about Sophia, about the screaming, about the illness, about the need for quiet in the East Wing, Maria had not flinched. She had simply nodded and said, "I understand." Rosa had asked, "Do you have experience with sick children?" Maria had paused, a long pause, the kind of pause that told Rosa there was a story behind it. "My son was very sick when he was little," Maria had said. "For 3 years. The doctors told me there was nothing they could do. I learned to live with it. I learned to live with a lot of things." Rosa hadn't asked for details. She was good at not asking for details. She had simply said, "You're hired. Start Monday. The East Wing. Room 14 is off limits. That's Sophia's room. You clean around it, not in it." Maria had nodded, and for 8 days she had cleaned the East Wing with quiet efficiency, her head down, her mouth closed, her dusting cloth moving in slow, methodical circles. The other staff barely noticed her. She was invisible, the way cleaners were supposed to be, the way Maria had learned to be after a lifetime of being overlooked. She was 53 years old. She had been born in a village in Sicily so small that it didn't appear on most maps, a cluster of stone houses on a hillside surrounded by olive trees, overlooking the Ionian Sea. Her grandmother had been the village healer, a woman named Nonna Lucia, who could cure fevers with herbal teas, set broken bones with splints made from olive branches, and calm screaming children with nothing but the sound of her voice. People came from neighboring villages to see Nonna Lucia. They brought their sick children, their elderly parents, their wives who couldn't sleep, and their husbands who couldn't stop drinking. Nonna Lucia treated them all. She never charged money. She accepted payment in eggs, in olive oil, in promises to help someone else in need. Maria had been Nonna Lucia's favorite grandchild, not because she was the smartest or the prettiest or the most accomplished. She was none of those things, but because she was the one who listened. While the other grandchildren ran through the olive groves and played in the sea, Maria sat at her grandmother's feet and absorbed everything. The herbal remedies, the bone-setting techniques, the songs, the ancient wordless songs that Nonna Lucia hummed while she worked, songs that had been passed down through generations of Sicilian women, songs that could calm a feverish child or ease a dying elder into their final rest. These songs are medicine, Nonna Lucia told her. Not the kind you buy at a pharmacy. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that was here before doctors and hospitals and machines that go beep. Don't ever forget them, Maria. Someday, someone will need them. And you will be the only one who remembers. Maria didn't forget. She memorized every song, every remedy, every technique. She practiced on her dolls, then on the neighborhood children, then on her own son when he was born. And when her son got sick, when he started screaming in his sleep at 5 years old, thrashing and clawing at invisible terrors, the way Sofia DeMarco would do 30 years later in a mansion across the ocean, Maria knew exactly what to do. The doctors in the village had been useless. They had prescribed sedatives that made her son groggy and confused. They had referred her to specialists in the city who charged money she didn't have. They had told her, in gentle voices and with sympathetic faces, that some children simply had nervous dispositions, and that he would grow out of it eventually. Maria had nodded politely, and ignored every single one of them. She knew what her grandmother would have done, and so she did it. Every night, for 3 years, Maria sat beside her son's bed and hummed, not the lullabies she sang during the day. Something else, a sequence of tones that Nonna Lucia had taught her. Each one held for exactly 7 seconds, each one slightly lower than the one before. The sleeping bell, her grandmother had called it. An ancient technique that used sound frequencies to reset the brain's malfunctioning sleep architecture. Maria didn't know the science behind it. She didn't know about brainwaves or REM cycles or neurological feedback loops. She just knew that it had worked for her grandmother. It had worked for her grandmother's mother. It had worked for generations of Sicilian women who had healed their children with nothing but the sound of their own voices. And it worked for her son. After 6 weeks of humming, his night terrors stopped, completely, permanently. He never had another one. He grew up healthy and strong and brilliant. He went to medical school. He became a pediatrician, a doctor who specialized in helping children because he remembered, somewhere deep in his bones, what it had felt like to be saved by his mother's voice. His name was Luca. He was 27 years old now. He worked at a children's hospital in Rome. He had never met Alessio DeMarco or Sofia DeMarco or anyone else in this mansion, but his mother's voice. The same voice that was now humming in the East Wing hallway, the same voice that had drifted through the door of Sofia's room like a ghost of an ancient cure, was about to change everything. Maria heard the footsteps before she saw the man. Heavy footsteps, tired footsteps, the footsteps of someone carrying a weight that was crushing him from the inside. She looked up from her baseboards and saw Alessio DeMarco standing in the hallway, his eyes red, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit rumpled like he had been sleeping in it for days. He looked nothing like the photographs she had seen in Rosa's office, the photographs of a powerful man in sharp suits, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at hospital openings, looking like he owned the world. This man looked like he was losing the only thing that mattered. "I'm sorry," Maria said quickly, standing up. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone. Rosa hired me last week. I cleaned the East Wing. I was just—" "You're humming—" Maria froze. She hadn't even realized she was doing it. The humming was automatic, a habit her grandmother had instilled in her so deeply that she did it without thinking. "It's a habit. My grandmother used to hum while she worked. She said it kept the bad spirits away. Alessio took a step closer. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made Maria uncomfortable. "That song, the one you were humming, where did you learn it?" "My grandmother taught me. It's an old Sicilian lullaby. She said it was for healing, for children who couldn't sleep." Alessio's face did something Maria couldn't quite read, a flicker of something between hope and pain and a desperate, fragile longing. "My mother used to sing that same song. She was from Sicily, too, a village near Palermo." "Where was your mother's village?" "Santa Lucia del Mela." Maria's hand stopped moving. "My grandmother's village. She was born there. In 1917. Her name was Lucia Ferrante. Everyone called her Nonna Lucia. She was a healer." Alessio stared at her. "My mother talked about a healer named Lucia. She said when she was a little girl she had terrible nightmares. A woman in the village cured her with nothing but her voice. My mother never forgot her. She said that woman saved her life." Maria felt the world shift, that strange, vertiginous sensation of two separate stories suddenly colliding, revealing that they had been one story all along. "Your mother was one of my grandmother's patients. She was a little girl with nightmares. My grandmother treated her. And then she taught that same lullaby to your mother. And your mother taught it to you. And you taught it to your daughter. Who taught it to you? My grandmother. She said someday someone would need it, and I would be the only one who remembered." Maria looked at Alessio, really looked at him, the way her grandmother had taught her to look at people, seeing past the surface into the pain beneath. "Is it your daughter?" "Rosa told me she's been sick. I hear her at night sometimes. The screaming." Alessio nodded. "He couldn't speak. When my son was little, he had the same thing. Night terrors. For 3 years. From age 5 to age 8, the doctors said there was nothing they could do. They gave us medication. It made him worse. They gave us therapy. It didn't help. I thought I was going to lose my mind from the worry." Alessio's head snapped up. "Your son had night terrors? For almost 3 years. Exactly like your daughter. The screaming, the thrashing, the eyes open but not awake. I tried everything, and then I remembered what my grandmother taught me." "What did you do?" "I hummed." Maria said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Every night for 6 weeks I sat beside his bed and hummed. The same sequences my grandmother taught me. The sleeping bell, she called it. Specific tones held for specific lengths of time at a specific point in the sleep cycle. It resets something in the brain. I don't know the science, I just know it works. It worked for my grandmother, it worked for your mother, it worked for my son. Dot, it was coming from the hallway. A woman's voice, low, slightly off-key, humming an old Sicilian lullaby. The same lullaby Alessio's own mother had sung to him when he was a child. The same lullaby he had sung to Sophia when she was a baby, rocking her in the yellow nursery with the wooden stars on the ceiling. He walked into the hallway. A woman was there, heavyset, in her 50s, wearing a grey cleaning uniform. She was dusting the baseboards with slow, methodical strokes. A bucket of soapy water sat beside her, and she was humming. "Who are you?" Alessio asked. The woman looked up, startled. "Maria," she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. Rosa hired me last week. I cleaned the east wing. I was just... You're humming. It's a habit. My grandmother used to hum while she worked. She said it kept the bad spirits away." Maria looked at Alessio, really looked at him, the way people rarely did. Most people looked at Alessio DeMarco and saw the empire, the money, the power. Maria just saw a tired man standing in a hallway, his eyes red, his shoulders slumped. "Are you okay?" "Not really," Alessio said. It was the first honest answer he'd given anyone in weeks. "Is it your daughter?" "Rosa told me. She's been sick. I hear her at night sometimes." Maria's face was open, kind, unguarded. "When my son was little, He had terrible night terrors. He would wake up screaming, just like your daughter. It was awful. I felt so helpless. Alessio's heart stopped. Your son had night terrors. For almost 3 years, from age 5 to age 8, the doctors said there was nothing they could do. They gave us medication. It made him worse. They gave us therapy. It didn't help. I thought I was going to lose my mind from the worry. What did you do? Maria set down her dusting cloth. She looked at Alessio with a strange expression, part pride, part sadness. I fixed it myself. Alessio stared at her. You fixed it? How? It's a little hard to explain. My grandmother was a healer in our village in Sicily. She taught me things. Old things. Things that doctors don't learn in medical school. She showed me a technique using sound frequencies, specific tones, played in a specific sequence, at a specific time in the sleep cycle. It resets something in the brain. She called it the sleeping bell. I used it on my son for 6 weeks, and he never had another night terror. He's 27 now. He's a doctor. A pediatrician, actually. He wanted to help children the way I helped him. Alessio felt the world tilt. You're telling me you cured your son's night terrors? The same condition that 25 of the most brilliant minds in the world just told me is impossible to cure, using a technique your grandmother taught you. Maria shrugged. I don't know about impossible. It's just old knowledge. My grandmother would say that modern medicine is very good at naming things and very bad at fixing them. Alessio grabbed her hand. Show me. Maria looked uncomfortable. Mr. DeMarco, I'm just a cleaning lady. You have all those doctors downstairs. I'm sure they know. They don't know. They've been trying for 3 weeks. They've spent $200 million. They've given up. Please. Show me. Maria led him to Sophia's room. The little girl was asleep, finally asleep, after 3 days of wakefulness, her small body curled up under the covers, her face pale and drawn. The monitoring equipment surrounded her bed like a fortress of blinking lights and humming machinery. Maria looked at it all with something between curiosity and disapproval. My grandmother never needed any of this, she said. She just needed her voice. She sat down on the edge of Sophia's bed. She didn't need a computer. She didn't need a brain scan. She didn't need 25 experts standing behind her, watching, with expressions that ranged from skeptical to hostile. She just needed the thing she had been doing since she was a little girl in a village in Sicily. The thing her grandmother had taught her on long summer afternoons, sitting under an olive tree, learning the old songs and the old ways. She started to hum, not the lullaby from the hallway, something else. A sequence of tones, each one held for exactly 7 seconds, each one slightly lower than the one before. It was simple, almost too simple, but there was something about it. A resonance, a vibration that you could feel in your chest as much as hear with your ears. The monitoring equipment began to register changes. Sophia's brain waves, which had been chaotic, disordered, trapped in the malfunctioning pattern of her night terrors, began to shift. Slowly at first, then faster. The chaotic spikes smoothed out, the disordered frequencies aligned. The 8-year-old brain that had been torturing itself for weeks began, for the first time, to rest. Maria hummed for 60 seconds. Then she stopped. The room was completely silent, not the ordinary silence of a quiet room. Something deeper, something reverent, the kind of silence that follows a miracle. Sophia's brain waves, which had been chaotic, disordered, trapped in the malfunctioning pattern of her night terrors for 27 straight days, were now showing normal sleep architecture. Deep sleep, restorative sleep, the kind of sleep that heals instead of harms. The monitors that had been screaming alarms for weeks were now humming softly, their readings stable, their warnings gone. The little girl who had been dying by inches, her memory failing, her attention collapsing, her small body giving out, was finally, peacefully, completely asleep. Behind Alessio, the 25 experts stood in stunned silence. They had been watching from the doorway. Dr. Reinhardt, Yuki Tanaka, Henrik, the Dutch hardware specialist, Dr. Lucia Oliveira from Brazil, David Mizrahi, the Israeli data analyst, Camille, the French technician, Dr. Chen, the child psychologist, who had made Alessio eat a sandwich, and 17 others, whose names and faces blurred together in the haze of exhaustion and disbelief. They had spent 3 weeks and $200 million trying to do what this woman, this cleaning lady, this grandmother, this stranger who had walked into their midst 8 days ago with a bucket and a dusting cloth, had just done in 60 seconds with nothing but her voice. Yuki Tanaka was the first to speak, the software architect who hadn't written a line of code in 6 years, who had resurrected a dead operating system from memory, who had muttered curses at her younger self. She was crying, not the dignified tears of a professional maintaining composure, real, ugly, unstoppable tears. It was frequencies, she whispered. The whole time, we were trying to solve a frequency problem with electricity. She solved it with sound. It's the same principle, the same physics. We were just using the wrong tool. Dr. Reinhardt was staring at the monitors like he was seeing a ghost. His hands were trembling, actually trembling this time, not the imagined tremor he had used as an excuse to avoid this work. I spent 40 years, he said. 40 years building machines to do what she just did with her voice. 40 years of research and papers and clinical trials. And the answer was sound. Simple sound. The frequencies we needed were never electrical. They were acoustic. A child's brain can't process our electrical stimulation because it's the wrong medium. But it can process sound. It's been processing sound since before it was born. It's been processing its mother's voice in the womb. We never even considered it. Henrik, the Dutch hardware specialist, pushed through the crowd and knelt beside Maria. His eyes were red. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know the frequencies?" Maria looked at him, this old man with the steady hands who had built the circuit boards that almost saved Sophia, who had come out of retirement and pushed himself past every limit and still come up short. She took his hands in hers. They were corlused, like hers. Different kinds of work, but the same kind of hands. "My grandmother taught me," she said. "She was a healer in our village in Sicily. She didn't know anything about brain waves or signal processors. She just knew that certain sounds, at certain times, could heal certain things. She called it the sleeping bell. She said it had been in our family for 10 generations. She taught me when I was a little girl, sitting under an olive tree, learning the old songs. She said someday, someone would need it, and I would be the only one who remembered." "You remembered," Henrik said, "after all these years. You remembered." "Some things you don't forget," Maria said. "The things that come from your grandmother, the things that were passed down through 10 generations of women who healed their children with nothing but their voices. Those things stay in your bones." Dr. Reinhardt stepped forward. His face was wet with tears. "I want to document this," he said. "Not in a machine, not in a research paper, in a book, in a song, in something that will last longer than a hard drive. This technique, these frequencies, they need to be preserved. They need to be taught. How many children could this help? How many families are suffering right now, the way you suffered, the way Mr. DeMarco suffered, because nobody taught them the sleeping bell?" Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "My grandmother would have wanted that. She never kept her knowledge secret. She taught anyone who wanted to learn. She said, healing isn't something you own. It's something you pass on. Over the next several hours, the 25 experts began to pack up their equipment. But they didn't leave, not away. They stayed for dinner, a strange impromptu meal in Alessio's kitchen, cooked by Maria using ingredients she found in the pantry. Pasta with olive oil and garlic. Simple food. The kind of food her grandmother used to make in the village in Sicily. The experts, these brilliant, accomplished, exhausted people, sat around Alessio's kitchen table and ate Maria's pasta and talked quietly about what had happened, about the failure of their technology and the triumph of her voice, about the humbling realization that sometimes the answer isn't more advanced, it's more ancient. Dr. Chen, the child psychologist, sat beside Maria and asked her to teach her the sleeping bell. "I've treated 200 children with night terrors," she said. "I've never been able to cure any of them. The best I could do was manage the symptoms. If this technique works, and I just saw it work, then I need to learn it. For my patients. For the children I haven't met yet." Maria taught her, right there in the kitchen, surrounded by empty pasta bowls and the lingering scent of garlic. Maria taught Dr. Chen the first sequence of the sleeping bell. Dr. Chen recorded it on her phone. She practiced it 3 times until she got the tones right. Then she cried again. 200 children, she said. 200 children I could have helped if I had known this. "You know it now," Maria said. "That's what matters. My grandmother used to say that knowledge doesn't expire. It just waits for someone to remember." That night, the first night of Sophia's recovery, Alessio didn't sleep in his own bed. He pulled a chair into Sophia's room and sat beside her while she slept. He watched the monitors that Maria had made unnecessary. The screens still running, still tracking, still showing the beautiful, boring, normal brain waves of a child who was finally resting. He held his daughter's hand, and for the first time in 27 days he allowed himself to believe that she was going to be okay. In the morning, Sophia woke up. Really woke up, clear-eyed, rested, herself again. She looked at her father, who was slumped in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers. His face creased with exhaustion and relief. She looked at the strange woman in the grey cleaning uniform who was sitting in the corner of the room, humming softly. "Papa?" Sophia said. "I had a dream. A good dream. I dreamed that Mama was singing to me." Alessio's heart stopped. He looked at Maria. Maria looked at Sophia. And for a moment, just a moment, the room was filled with something that felt almost like grace. "That was Maria," Alessio said. "She was humming the same song Mama used to sing, the lullaby from Sicily, the one Nonna Lucia taught to my mother, and my mother taught to Mama, and Mama taught to us." Sophia turned to look at Maria. "You knew my Mama's song?" Maria smiled. "I knew your great-grandmother, a long, long time ago. She was a little girl in my grandmother's village. My grandmother taught her that song, and she taught it to your grandmother, and your grandmother taught it to your Mama, and your Mama sang it to you, and now I've sung it back to you. That song has been traveling through our families for almost 100 years. It was always going to find its way back to you." Sophia didn't fully understand. She was 8 years old. The concept of a song traveling through 4 generations of 2 different families, across an ocean, through death and grief and time itself, was too big for her small mind. But she understood enough. She understood that this woman had helped her, that the humming she had heard in her dream, the humming that had felt like her mother's voice, had been real. That she was safe now, that she could sleep. She reached out and took Maria's hand. "Will you stay?" she asked, "and hum the song again tonight, in case I need it?" Maria looked at Alessio. Alessio nodded. "I'll stay," Maria said. "Not just tonight, for as long as you need me." Sophia's breathing was deep and even. Her face was peaceful. The monitors showed normal sleep architecture, the first normal sleep she had experienced in almost a month. Behind Alessio, the 25 expert stood in stunned silence. Dr. Reinhardt was staring at the monitors like he was seeing a miracle. Yuki Tanaka had tears streaming down her face. The Dutch hardware specialist had his hand over his mouth. "How?" Dr. Reinhardt whispered. "How is that possible?" Maria looked at him. "The device you built, it stimulates the brain with electrical impulses, yes? At specific frequencies? Yes. That's the core function. But it can't process a child's." "You're using electricity," Maria said. "My grandmother used sound. The principle is the same. The brain responds to frequencies. You were trying to use a hammer when you needed a tuning fork. It's not the tool that matters. It's the frequency dot." The room was silent. Dr. Reinhardt stared at the monitors. Then he stared at Maria. Then he started to laugh. Not a happy laugh, but the laugh of a man who had just realized he had spent 40 years studying something that a Sicilian grandmother had understood intuitively. "I spent my entire career building machines to do what you just did with your voice," he said. 40 years, 200 papers, millions of dollars in research grants. And you just hummed." Maria smiled. "My grandmother used to say that the smartest people in the world are the ones who know how to listen. Not to words, to sounds." That night, for the first time in 27 days, Sofia DeMarco slept through the night. She slept for 11 hours. When she woke up, really woke up, clear-eyed and rested, and herself again. She walked downstairs and found her father sitting at the kitchen table with a heavy-set woman in a grey cleaning uniform. There were coffee cups between them. They were talking quietly the way old friends talk. "Papa?" Sofia said. "I had a dream, a good dream. I dreamed that Mama was singing to me." Alessio looked at Maria. Maria looked at Sofia, and for a moment, just a moment, the room was filled with something that felt almost like grace. Maria stayed, not as a cleaning lady, as part of the family. She taught Sofia the lullabies her grandmother had taught her. The old songs from Sicily, the ones that had been passed down through generations of women who knew how to heal with nothing but their voices. She taught Alessio, too, when he admitted that he had forgotten the lullabies his own mother used to sing. They would sit in the garden in the evenings, Alessio, Sofia, and Maria, and hum together, 3 voices finding the same frequency, the same ancient resonance that had been healing children since long before there were machines to measure brainwaves. The 25 experts packed up their equipment and went home. Dr. Reinhardt retired for the second time, but this time he didn't go back to the Alps. He stayed in the city and worked with Maria to document her grandmother's techniques. "This needs to be preserved," he said. "Not in a machine, in a book, in a song, in something that will last longer than a hard drive." Sofia grew up. She never had another night terror. She learned all of Maria's songs. When she was 16, she started volunteering at a children's hospital, singing to the little ones who couldn't sleep. When she was 22, she went to medical school. She wanted to be a pediatrician, just like Maria's son, and somewhere in a village in Sicily, under an olive tree that had been standing for 300 years, the ghost of an old woman who had taught her granddaughter to hum was finally at peace, because her knowledge had not died with her. It had crossed an ocean. It had walked into a mansion through the service entrance. It had done in 60 seconds what 25 experts and $200 million could not do. It had saved a little girl who just wanted to sleep. And here is what I want you to take from this story. The answer you're looking for, the solution to the problem that has been keeping you up at night, might not come from the expert you're expecting. It might not come from the person with the most degrees, or the most money, or the most published papers. It might come from the cleaning lady humming in the hallway. It might come from the old woman in your village who never went to school, but knows things that can't be taught in a classroom. It might come from the person you overlook every single day, the person who is invisible to you, the person you never thought to ask, because sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the one with the PhD. It's the one who remembers what her grandmother taught her. So, here is my question for you. Who are you overlooking? What knowledge are you ignoring because it doesn't come in the package you expected? What old song, what ancient wisdom, what forgotten technique is waiting for you to listen? Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the people you've been overlooking, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you never miss another story. Tell me in the comments, who is someone you underestimated who turned out to know exactly what you needed? I read every comment, and your story might inspire the next one I tell. We tell stories here about redemption, about hidden wisdom, about the moments when the least expected person changes everything, and we have so many more coming. Until next time, remember, a Sicilian grandmother once said that the smartest people in the world are the ones who know how to listen, not to words, to sounds.